Hey everybody, my name is Ted Forbes and welcome back to another episode of The Art of Photography. And in today's episode, we are going to cover another photographer, another contemporary photographer who, in my not so humble and of course always accurate opinion, I think Keith Carter is one of the most important living photographers today. And I'm going to explain why. I want to show some of his work. I've covered him a little bit on this show before. I've used some of his work as examples when we've done, the composition episodes. And Keith is an extremely interesting photographer to me. He's living and working today. And I think his work, what makes it exciting to me is it embodies a certain traditional aspect of things while at the same time pushing it forward. So, in terms of what he uses for composition, I think, just generally his layout and his eye for composition is fairly traditional. You're going to see a lot of rules of thirds, rule of odds, the usual fare. But what makes him stand out and what I think makes Keith push the envelope a little bit is a couple different things. First of all, his subject matter. It's a wide range of stuff and he uses a wide range of techniques, but I love what he picks is composition in terms of subject. A lot of it is, this heavy Americana kind of thing. Being in American photography, he really embodies a lot of that. So it's everything from, there's some amazing portraits that he's done to kind of these whimsical setup kind of shots with the kid with the dunce hat. He did a whole series on horses. He's done dogs. There's a really wonderful subject matter, but at the same time, there's kind of a dark side to him too. And he has this kind of weird apothecary kind of thing that he does with photograms sometimes, where he'll use things like bat skeletons or butterflies, things of that nature that kind of give that a very interesting feel. Another thing about Keith that's amazing is the wide range of techniques that he tends to use. You'll see everything from traditional silver gelatin. He's worked with tintype. There's a huge nod to Fox Talbot in early photography with use of photograms and the like. He has a wonderful sense of how to tone a photograph. You see a lot of T-toning, a lot of selenium toning. I'm going to put some links to some stuff in the show notes where you can go check out Keith's work. He's very accessible, he's very easy to find, and very prolific as well. He has about 11 monographs that he's published, I believe, to date, and his work's pretty much in all the major photography collections in the United States. He lives in Texas. He's down in Beaumont. I have never met Keith. I would love to. He really is one of my heroes in terms of people who influence and inspire me, and I really think the world of Keith and his work. There's a DVD that somebody did on Keith that is highly recommended. It's a little tricky to find and sometimes it's not really cheap, but if you like Keith's work, it's amazing, and there's actually some extra stuff on there in addition to this large documentary on Keith Carter, but there's some additional stuff where it's literally just a little handheld camcorder interviewing him in the darkroom, and he's talking about going through some of his toning processes, some portraits of his mother at the point where she was suffering from Alzheimer's. Very, very strong material, but very warm and friendly at the same time, being these pictures of his mother, but there's a very serious thing that's going on within the subject matter. Also, more recently, I'm going to wait till we get into showing the work, but I think Keith's work has taken a really interesting turn in the last couple of years. So let's go over and let's take a look at the work of the always awesome Keith Carter. Okay, so we are looking at the work of Keith Carter today, and I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to put links in the show notes so you can find all those if you view this episode on theartofphotography.tv, theartofphotography.tv. Look below the video you're watching now if you're not on your iPhone or something, and I will put links to things. The sites I'm going to link up, first of all, are Keith Carter's website, and I'm going to link up his Facebook page as well, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. He's got some cool behind-the-scenes shots, so that's why I'm recommending that. Plus, support the guy. He's amazing. The other thing that is interesting is I'm going to just be doing a Google image search for a lot of these, and I'll explain why. We're going to go look through some images in just a second, and literally all I did is I typed his name into Google and hit images. And the reason I did that is because Keith has redone his website, and since we have talked about websites recently quite a bit, I think this is worth mentioning, is if you go to archive/new work, and perhaps there's an intention of putting the archive in here at some point, but I like the fact that Keith keeps his work extremely fresh on here. The oldest goes back to 2011, I believe, with Imagining Paradise. And I want to come back to these because these are some of the newer things he's done in the last couple of years, and there's quite a difference between what you see here and some of the earlier work that, put him on the map and what he became known for. So anyway, I think that's an interesting point too, because, just as an aside, we've talked about portfolios, and when you select work for your portfolio, sometimes it's not so much the work you've done in the past, it's work you want to be doing. And I think that's interesting that Keith chose to really only include more recent things. And I'm not going to assume that I know why he did that, because there may be a more personal or deeper reason than that, but I think it's a very interesting move. Either way, I want to go through some of the classic images too, because I want to talk about his work and some of the things that, I just find very interesting about Keith. One of his most famous images, and this was taken, I believe, in Beaumont, Texas, or near there, is these two boys in a swamp with a jar catching fireflies. And again, as I mentioned earlier, his subject matter tends to be very American, a lot of Americana that you're going to see in here. And those types of subjects, I think, are really, what makes Keith Keith. And you're going to see a wide range of stuff, but they are kind of threaded together by that. It's a very accessible subject, even when he does still lifes, just the kinds of things he chooses. What I love about it is there's a very deliberate, if you contrast this with like the images of the horses that he did a whole series of, there's a real deliberate selection of what he's shooting at all times. It's not kind of run and gun street photos. It's thought out, it's composed. And I think it's one of the things that makes Keith wonderful. And a lot of these that you're going to see, not so much the horses. This is very traditional in terms of technique. It's just a high contrast images of some white horses on black background that happens to be a wonderful image. Rule of odds, rule of thirds, things like that come into play, fairly traditional. But if you look at things like the boys with the butterfly, what's interesting about this is what is in focus in this image and what the focal point is. And you can tell by looking at it that it is actually these magnolia trees back here. And I've heard Keith talk about this image, and I find that interesting because there's enough information within what's blurred out here to see that it's two young boys in a swamp with a jar full of fireflies, presumably something like that. But when you put those magnolia leaves in focus, they give it a context, because that is something that is very indicative of the landscape in South Texas, with the magnolia leaves in the water. And I believe, and from hearing Keith talk about it, that was really intentional. That was where the focus of the image should have been, and that was the reason why. And I find that interesting because, it'd be really easy to shoot this photo, make the boys in focus in a very traditional way, blur out the background, and the image is different. It doesn't have that same sort of interest. Just to talk quickly about some of Keith's focusing techniques, because there's things that he's kind of known for. Keith uses tilt-shift lenses, which he uses in a very unconventional way. Tilt-shift lenses are designed for usually when you're shooting architectural photos, things of that nature, and you need to straighten up lines and stuff like that. What it does is if you think of a view camera, like a large format, and you're able to actually move the lens around in various ways, what you're doing is you're throwing the focus plane out of whack. And so basically, if you start spinning that enough and you use it in the way it's not supposed to be designed to do, you actually throw the focus off of the film plane. And Keith shoots a lot of film. And so that's where you're seeing these largely weird, blurred areas. This is kind of a technique that's been overdone lately with, architectural photography or even outdoor kind of landscape stuff where you make things look like miniatures by just putting a little line where the cars are in focus and everything else is blurred out. Keith does use that technique a lot, and one might argue that he probably goes overboard with it, but I think he uses it to a good effect. I think what he does is absolutely beautiful. I mentioned this earlier. This is the child in the dunce hat. Just a simply beautiful, stunning image as far as I'm concerned. I absolutely love it. This is another one of my favorites, the hand, the guy walking by. So, obviously suggesting the thumb part of the hand. It's a very simple image, but very interesting. There's another one of the aircraft here with the child, and this is another famous image of his that's blurred out. Earlier I mentioned portraits as well, and in the DVD about Keith Carter, and I'll link that below in the show notes as well. This is the portrait of his mother. There was a whole series of these, and it's a really sad story and kind of moving, actually, about how Keith's mother, this is about the time she had Alzheimer's and had kicked in to a point where it was really getting bad. And he was visiting her in the hospital and shot a series of images, and again, I don't want to assume anything for Keith, but probably being very therapeutic for him on some level. It would be for me if it were my mother indeed. And there's just a certain beauty to these. It's interpretive what one sees here, but you see a woman who obviously is disoriented in pain, but it's such a beautiful image, and she's a very beautiful person as well, and that shows through. And I think, it's a real subtle thing and very artistic on Keith's behalf, but just, beautiful work. What can you say? Another subject that he has shot with before that I haven't seen done a lot with more recently, but these kind of, again, Americana, but with these lace dresses, studies in high key photography. They're very bright images and just very beautiful. Compositionally, again, very straightforward. But I hope another thing you're seeing here is this wide range of stuff that you're going to see in Keith's work, particularly with subject matter. This is another one of my favorites. Is the girl. She's holding sparklers, but it looks like she's exploding or on fire or something. It's amazing. Again, you're going to find, I mentioned earlier, symbolic things like crows, things like bat wings, bat skeletons. It's a beautiful image. This one with this woman's hair is really pretty. That's another earlier image. Where is it? The folks with the masks here. So you get this kind of, I don't know. It's kind of a Fox Talbot influenced kind of thing. There's a creepiness to it. This boy in the bubble's pretty cool. Anyway, some amazing work. Spheres are another thing you see a lot in Keith's work too that I should mention is just this kind of interest that he has in things that are spherical in nature. And there's another very popular image here. Yeah, it's this kind of universe-looking thing. But again, you see a lot of globes, a lot of spheres, a lot of circular objects, things like that. It's very appealing to Mr. Carter. Anyway, a lot of these are earlier images that he became well known for. I recommend any of his monograph books. They're all amazing. What I want to show you now is a more recent turn that Keith has taken with his work, which is kind of influenced by a traumatic event in his own life. This is an image. Apparently, it looks like a bird of some sort in a chair. And what's interesting about the image is how distorted and scratched up it is. It looks filthy. And Keith recently has had some issues with eye cancer. And can you imagine, as a photographer, all of a sudden having something like eye cancer that's even threatening your ability to see? And via treatments, and I only know this through interviews I've read with Keith, but via treatments that he's had, he started to actually have distortions in his eye. And so what he is starting to do is capture that in photographic form with what he's working on. So I'm going to flip back over to his website now, and I want to show you some of the newer work. But this whole Imagining Paradise series was a series of, actually, these are prints made from negatives that are damaged. And he'll end up trying to do as many shots on the roll as possible, because if it doesn't come out quite like he likes it, it's going to have to be redone. So it's everything from pouring chemicals onto the negative to literally scratching it with needles to pens, running it across the floor, whatever works, and it's this highly experimental, it is a hawk, by the way, highly experimental way of taking images, manipulating the negative, and literally damaging it, and that becomes part of the process. It's almost a layer of abstract art that is printed on. And first time I saw these, I wondered if they were on the print level, but they are actually on the negative level, so you can make duplicate prints of these, and they come out as such. But very interesting, and I think there's a lot that's said here. There's almost kind of like, cave drawing quality to some of these things when they're distorted to a certain point. But I think that's such an interesting thing to take something that's such a negative experience as a photographer. You imagine having something that's threatening your vision and turn that into influencing your work in this aesthetic. And I think Keith comes off in interviews as being a very happy individual and a very interesting guy and very enthusiastic, and obviously a tremendous passion for photography. And I think that that's just kind of par for the course in that kind of thing, is taking a positive or a negative and turning it into a positive. I'll show you a couple other things because I just find them fascinating. He's done some work with, I believe, some of these. Okay, so what you're looking at here, this is a flying squirrel. This is a photogram, and these are really big. So a dead squirrel is actually placed onto a piece of paper that's really large, shot with light, and that's a photogram. There's no camera involved. It's kind of a shadow exposure on a paper. What I like about Keith's photograms is the way that, first of all, so there's some opacity at times to things like the butterfly, so you end up getting shading and an image that's evoked here. Again, this is really channeling a lot of Fox Talbot. And then also in the back, what he ends up doing with, it's not just a flat black background. There's a lot of texture going on here, and it's just very interesting. This is, I don't know if these are grouped, it says historical process, so he grouped it together in a series of that. So you're going to see some white plate images, some collodion stuff, some heavy experimentation in those things, and it's just beautiful work. And I love the way, this is one of the things I love about Keith, is that there's such a nod to everything that came before. So really, as a photographer, he fits in that lineage, and I think that is so important. You can go through these on your own. There's some amazing stuff in here, everything from tintypes, wet plate, photograms, you name it. I mean, how Fox Talbot is this? Just some lace, this handkerchief that's stuck on with the photogram made, but still with the signature Keith Carter blur. And I don't know what the technique is to that. Maybe it employs using a fan to actually get motion in there, or maybe it's moving the light itself when you're actually making the photogram. But very interesting stuff, and I really, really love it. The dead crane is pretty amazing too. It's a blue heron, pardon me. Anyway, awesome stuff. You should check it out. There's also a very conceptual work that he's done on here, which I thought was interesting, when his wife was actually going through some testing procedures. And with, well, here, my wife Patricia went under a series of medical treatments, a side effect of which was constant tearing. So what they actually did was took silver gelatin paper and made photograms of her tears. They're really interesting. They almost look like bones in a certain way, but not. But it's definitely organic. So literally this is just salt tears that are stained as a result of medical testing that's been going on with his wife, and they're developed in the darkroom. And I just find this fascinating. Again, this constant creativity and this constant desire to push forward and let things influence his own work that just happen in life. And I think, Keith's just a genius at that. Anyway, I could sit here and gloat about Keith all day. You need to go check out his work on your own. Once again, Keith Carter, I will link to his website. Check out his Facebook page. There's some behind-the-scenes photos that are kind of cool. The bad images here. There's Keith showing some work here, which is kind of neat, this collection of butterflies. And anyway, check him out for yourself. See what you think. And again, for the images, because of what's on his website, I had to go do an image search just for Keith Carter, and that's what I've been showing you here, just on work of his that I know. So anyway, once again, that is Keith Carter. Hey guys, just a quick addendum to this. I have to apologize. I found Keith on Facebook, saw that image, and decided to use it in the show. If you go to his Facebook page, like it, and then scroll down under photographs, you're going to find a long series. Here's all the shots of his mother, and I apologize that I did not notice this before. And a lot of these classic images are right here. So even though they're not on his website at the moment, some favorites of mine, the blackberries from A Certain Alchemy, this bald gentleman listening to a phonograph. Just go through here and do yourself a favor and treat yourself and enjoy, because there's some amazing work in here. I did not realize these were all in here because I did not look deep enough. So anyway, again, links in the show notes. This is on the Facebook page. So that is the work of Keith Carter, and I hope you guys are finding these interesting. I think it's important, we move around as far as subject matter goes a lot on the show here. And I think that doing these kinds of photography lit episodes to expose you guys to people that you may or may not be familiar with, and learning how to look at people, I think is really, really interesting and really important to anyone's development as a photographer. First of all, you have to remember why we all got into this, and it was because of pictures, and it's because of what a photographer who is great can do with that, and what established people, it's everything. It's composition, it's material, it's technique, it's process, it's, sometimes there's a psychology element to it. And, Keith Carter, I really think, that's why I say I think he's one of the most important photographers today, because he embodies all those things, but he doesn't ignore tradition and all the things that came before him. It's like he is a really natural extension to the evolution of photography in the historical sense, and I think that's really important. So, get out there, see some stuff, check out Keith's work on your own, and if you ever get a chance to see some of these, fortunately, Keith lives in Texas as well as I do, and there is a gallery in Dallas that handles his work, and he's shown there a couple times. I've never been able to go over and actually meet Keith, and I would love to one day. I really can't say enough good stuff about it. Anyway, I hope this is something you guys have enjoyed. And anyway, that's about it for today. And see you guys next week. Take care. Later.